I want to share my story today about how I enlisted into the US Army because I feel like too many people still don't know what to expect and how to make that decision so that you don't end up regretting it in the end. I honestly think I got really lucky because I did choose I'm not going to say the incorrect job, but definitely not the job that I would have loved to have done for the rest of my life. Hi, my name is Dali Rivera. I am the founder and creator of DaliTalks LLC and the Diversity and Anti-Bullying Academy. I am a U.S. Army veteran, a mom of two beautiful daughters, a wife to a U.S. Army veteran, and I'm going to share my story with you today. So I enlisted in 1997. And when I did it, I pretty much did it because I wanted that GI Bill. That's it. I also wanted to travel and I wanted to make my mom proud. Being the eldest child of a single mom, I'm the oldest of six. I felt like I had a lot of pressure and responsibility to do right so that all of my siblings looking up at me had a standard to live up to because that's what my mom always she always inculcated in me the idea that I was going to be that person that would either like drop that standard or kept it high. So by the time I was 14, my parents split. Thank goodness. That was actually a really good thing for us. And my mom struggled. She had to resort to social services to survive. We lived in government housing. And even before my father left us, we didn't really live in good neighborhoods. It was rough. Um, and we are also immigrants. We came from Nicaragua when I was 7. So that was in 86. And as immigrants, you have to adapt to a new language, a new culture, establish yourself in your careers. And my parents were working on that. And with the language barrier and also the education barrier, because, not having an American education, it impacts you. So I knew that I had to go to college. I knew that the expectation of me and my siblings was to do more than my parents had done. So I was working through it was called JTPA program. Um, it was like for youth to kind of like, get some skills. And I was working at the library in my city. And a really handsome man in uniform walked in, and I kind of leaned over to my friend. I was like, oh my God, I wonder what it's like to be in the military. And it was like he heard me. So while I'm at this job training partnership act program or whatever it was called, JTPA, I pretty much started talking with this guy, and he came over, and when he asked, I heard that you're interested in the military. I just started asking questions. The more he gave me, the more I thought, this is a good way to get an education that I cannot pay for and my mom can't pay for, and do something with my life. I can travel, get work experience, get a college education, and make my mom proud. And I'd gone through so much during childhood that I let my grades go down. So I was not very confident with college. I actually was kind of in a way grateful that I felt like I have an excuse to not to go directly to college. I can just go into the military. That's still like me doing something with my life. So I had to take what is called the ASVAB. It's this really long test. And depending on how you score on this test, you you are given options of jobs. So this ASVAB, or Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery Test. has different sections in it to test, like different areas of your knowledge and skills and stuff. And I scored kind of low, I think. I don't know if it was just okay or low, but I feel like it was low because I just felt like I didn't have what it took. But I got several options and I didn't like any of them because in my mind, I wanted to be a military police officer, or a linguist because I love languages. I've always loved them. So those were not some of the options provided to me. By then, the recruiter who I initially met was no longer with me. He had to move on, and his boss took over. His boss was kind of shady, didn't really give me the truth about everything. So I found out later on. And one of the things that he told me was just go ahead and pick one. You can always change jobs later. And I thought, really? Are you sure? He said, yeah, yeah. So one of the jobs that were offered to me that did spike a little bit of interest was to be a mechanic on tanks and heavy wheel vehicles. And I like that because I always like to tinker with stuff. I used to take apart my car, the inside of my car, to supposedly wash the carpet. I'd find any excuse. Um, I'd put it back together, as well as the toaster, the oven, the microwave, whatever I could get my hands on. And so I chose this job for an enlistment period of 3 years, which was the minimum. Where you do that is at this military entrance processing station. You do your testing of the ASVAB. You get to choose your job, and that's also where you first report to ship off to wherever you're going to go to for basic training. And so when you get there, you are, among all these other people who are enlisting. And you don't realize, or I didn't realize, that you could have asked so many more questions even then. But pretty much, I signed a contract at the age of 17 to enlist by the time I was 18 and out of high school. So less than 30 days before, after I had graduated high school, I reported to MEPS. I remember I swore in twice. And during that, before that swearing in, they tell you, hey, if you don't want to do this, you can get out. But they do it in an intimidating way to make you feel like, don't punk out, don't be a, what. So I didn't punk out, although I really wanted to just turn around and go home, because by then I realized, oh my gosh, I'm leaving everything behind and I'm going to be gone for a while with all these strangers. And it was my first time away from home, aside from one summer camp of like a week long. So then the second swearing in came, same thing. I think at that point, one guy walked out and I still didn't believe it. I was like, there's no way they're going to let him just go home. So I just kept going. And next thing you know, I, at South Carolina, at Fort Jackson, South Carolina, in basic training. And one of the things that I did not expect was how mentally exhausting it was going to be. Physically, of course, because you're not used to being so active, right? You're like road marching with 30 pounds at least, in your back, on your back, on this really sandy mountain, and it was hot. Well, I went in summer, so it was super humid, and I was not humid. I was not used to humidity. Being a California girl, I never really experienced humidity until then. I actually thought when I got off the plane and wherever it is I landed, because I actually don't even know where I landed. I remember thinking, wow, there's something wrong with the AC in this airport. Like the air feels so thick and heavy, and then we get out of the airport and get on buses. And I'm like, wow, there's something wrong with these ACs. It was not the AC. It was just humidity. So yeah, one of the things that happened to my body is, like, everybody goes through different changes because it is intense change, right? From your normal life to suddenly working out every single day and getting up super early. Like, I think formation was at 6 a.m., but you had to get up at 4:30 or 5. I can't remember. Pretty early, because you had to, get ready, get your bunk ready, get to formation. You had to be dressed. You had to do your personal hygiene. all of that. And then your days are really long because you're training all day long. And sometimes while you're having lunch, you're also like in a class, unless you have one of those lunches where you actually go to the dining facility. But when you're in the dining facility, you have to hurry up, eat. You pretty much have to swallow and then taste later. So, um, you're also drinking a ton of water because hydration is really important, and you're just learning and exercising all the time. And you have three phases: red, yellow, and green. Red is like you have no privileges whatsoever, and yellow, you have like, I don't even remember what, but it didn't feel like you really had any privileges because they take your time the entire time that you're there, of the, what, 9 weeks that you're there, or 8 weeks. I don't even remember. And I was a drill sergeant. I ended up being a drill sergeant. But anyway, you go through all of the training, and at any time, if you injure yourself, you had to be held back or be a holdover, quote unquote, where they have to like wait for you to heal and then start all over again. Sometimes you have to start all the way from the beginning. Sometimes you start at whatever phase or whatever week you have to stop at. But it's not fun because when you're a holdover, you are pretty much doing like little menial jobs just to get paid because you're on the clock, right? You're getting paid because this is your job, is to be trained. So the only way that you can break your enlistment is really if you have a really severe injury that it's just going to prevent you from continuing to serve. Um, and or if you have some like really really bad behavior issue. So people did crazy things. Some people would injure themselves. Some people would try to start a fight to try to have a reason to be sent home because they were desperate. Some people had like mental breakdowns. Grown people, I mean, the majority of people that enlist, they were, right at high school, but there were some who were in their late 20s, mid 30s. And when you graduate from basic training, there's this huge ceremony. Some people fly in from whatever state to see their child graduate. And then you go on to AIT, Advanced Individual Training. And depending on your job, you go to a different base. So I ended up going to Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland to be trained on how to be a mechanic on vehicles like tanks and 5 tons and um, other like Humvees, other heavy wheel vehicles. So I was there for about 13 weeks. It was long. I hated it, to be honest. It was so boring fixing things, and then having to learn about the technical aspects for me was just not, it was not fun. It was so dry. And while you're there, you're still in training. So you again have red, yellow, and green phase, and you have different privileges. However, in AIT, your privileges do end up mattering a lot more because you actually do get to go out and dress into civilian clothes when you're in, I think it's yellow phase, you can only do it on the weekends. And then green phase, you get to do it every day, including the weekends after work hours or school hours. And it was just, long. There are a lot of tests at every phase because they want to make sure that you're learning and that you graduate. You still have to do physical activities. You have to follow the rules. And then while you're waiting, you're also waiting for your orders, which is pretty much the Department of Defense, DOD, assigning you your first duty station. Now, depending on how your enlistment contract went, some people, their enlistment contract said that you could enlist with another buddy. So like a friend, a sibling, a cousin, and that meant that you could go to the same basic training together. If you had the same job, you would go to the same AIT together. And sometimes you could even go to the same duty station together. Other people on their contract, what they got was money, a bonus to enlist. When you get a bonus, you get about half up front, and then the rest is paid to you in increments on the anniversary of every year that you have left on your enlistment. And then there are other people whose contract stated that, they could pick their first duty assignment. There's many different things. Some of them, their contract said that they could go and try out for, say, SEER, one of the special trainings, or like airborne school or anything like that. But pretty much the whole process from the moment that you go in to basic training to graduating AIT, you expect to not really have a lot of freedom and to be serious about learning and testing out. Once you get to your duty station, the first time you move from your training to your first duty station, the government does not pay your family's move there. And then they only pay for you to be shipped there, right? So if you're a married person, then when you get to your duty station, depending on where it is, they might allow you to bring your family over. Once you bring your family over, then you show proof that you have a family that depends on you, and you will be provided with BAH, which is basic allowance for housing. The service member always gets either housing money, BAH, or barracks to live in. And the service member gets a small food stipend if they live out of barracks. But and then if they live in housing, they still get it. And then what else? But if you live in the barracks, you don't need the stipend for food because they provide you with a dining facility that provides meals 3, sometimes 4 times a day, depending on the zone that you're in and how many shifts there are on the base, because some people work odd hours, so they have to have food like in the middle of the night for the late night shift to swap out. So once you make it into your duty station, then you settle in, you do your job, and then you can start requesting to go to school. And when you go to school, you can use your tuition assistance, which has to be approved by your command, usually the commander, first sergeant, and commander. And well, I mean, down to your squad leader. Actually, you have a squad leader, and you have a platoon sergeant, then you have first sergeant, and then the commander. So all 4 of those people usually have to approve it. And in order for them to approve it, you just have to be a really good soldier that does their job. And as long as the school does not interfere with your work, you're good to go. In the military, there were 3, I guess, branches, of career paths that I could have gone, and I didn't know about this. So I was an enlisted service member. I was a non-commissioned officer when I made sergeant. So what that means is usually people who don't have college, they usually go this way because in order to be an officer, you have to have college. It's required, 4 years of college. Then there's the warrant officer track, and that one is when an enlisted person decides to apply to warrant officer school to become an officer. And you have to meet certain criteria. You have to get accepted, and then you have to pass, which is pretty, several weeks of a lot of hard work. And again, lots of testing, lots of military education, and it helps when you have college education. So you can do this, and then you can still go to college on your own time. There's another program called Green to Gold, where again, an enlisted person can apply to this program. And really what it does is it like kind of pauses your active duty time in order for you to go full-time to school to get that 4-year degree. And in return, you owe the military so many years of service, usually 6 years. When you become an officer, then you, instead of being like a private first class, a specialist, or a sergeant, you end up being a lieutenant, second lieutenant, a major, all of that, the officer side. With a warrant officer, their rank goes from Chief Warrant Officer 1 all the way to 5. And they all have different responsibilities. So I decided to stay the non-commissioned officer track. I really, really enjoyed it because In the army, they pride themselves with being the backbone of the army. They pretty much make stuff happen while the officers plan everything out. They do the budgets, they do the logistics, they do all of that. And then enlisted people, we make everything move. We, yeah, we take the orders from them, but we also take orders from our own enlisted higher echelon. Um, so it was really interesting learning that, because I think that in my situation, had I known about the warrant officer track much earlier, I probably would have applied for it a lot earlier. I had the intentions to do it before I got out, but by then I had been in the military like almost 10 years. And so before that 10 years, I decided to submit my paperwork to leave right at the 10-year mark. So I left because it takes a toll on you. By then, I had one child and I had another on the way. And I saw so many families struggle with a parent being deployed or just having long work hours. And in my job as a mechanic, we had really, really long hours all the time. It was very different than other fields within the military, because in the military you have everything. I mean, you have medics, like nurses, you have um, doctors, you have psychiatrists, you have firefighters, you have people who sew, like seamstresses, you have laundry people. I had no idea about this. You have cooks, you have veterinarians, not just veterinarians that care for domestic animals, but for cattle and stuff like that, because a lot of them, sometimes they have these medical humanitarian missions where they go to different countries to help, you know, farmers or people in rural areas with their livestock so that they can survive, so that they can also grow their crops. You have people who are in agriculture. I mean, the military, if there's a job in the civilian sector, the military has it. And the wonderful thing about it is that you get trained, you get paid to train in that specialty, and you can make a career out of it. If you decide to get out early, and early is anything less than 20 years, then you can continue, that same field outside of the military, or you can change it, because you can. I decided to change it because being a mechanic was rough on the body, and I kind of got tired of being dirty all the time. So when I got out, I went back to school, because I actually took over 130 some credits of college units, but did not get a degree because I just didn't know what I wanted to be. So I got out, after the 10 years, with two babies, and my husband was already out, and I went back to school. I used my GI Bill, and I ended up getting my master's in women and gender studies, with a concentration in social policy and leadership. And that concentration helped me a lot to create the Diversity and Anti-Bullying Academy, because it all began with researching on the policies at schools and how they handle bullying and how they handle, like certain types of training, and whether it was working or not. So that's what I do now. Totally different than what I did in the military, except I still teach, because I did become a drill sergeant in the military, which was really, really exhausting, but it was, I think, the most rewarding job that I had the entire 10 years. Because I got to mold minds, and I got to really see like who the people entering in the military are. It's weird when it's just you looking at yourself, right? Because you're like, it's just me. But now looking back, I think, my gosh, the military is really being ran by these amazing, smart, young people in their early 20s. And it's incredible that we entrust our young Americans to run the national security defense of this country. It's just incredible that they're the ones doing the hard work. They're the ones following the orders from the officers, or the sergeant majors. I was just in disbelief that I went from 3 years that I initially planned to 10, and I probably would have gone way beyond 20 had I not had children. But I had to, for me, I had to put my children first because I saw how hard it was, because it does take a toll on you, even if you're not in the infantry. Don't misconstrue, the physical impact that it takes, regardless of what job you do in the military. You still train and it's still hard on your body. Um, so you have to take that into consideration. And overall, do I regret my military service? Absolutely not. I would do it all over again. It was really hard because of some people. I'm not going to lie, there were some people who really didn't need to be there leading people. But then there were also really amazing people who helped mentor me. And the soldiers, they really motivated me to become better. And I think that that experience being a drill sergeant is what really opened my eyes to the passion that I truly had, because I always quarreled within myself about, what do I really want out of life? What do I want to do? And what I wanted to do was help people, but I didn't know how. And I saw a lot of things in the military that weren't supposed to happen, like discrimination, racism, things like that, just like it would in any other organization or in society, right? But that was part of the reason why I started the Diversity and Anti-Bullying Academy. But of course, the main reason was because somebody messed with my baby and I had to go and do some research to get her some help. But that's my story. I hope that if you are considering the military, that you don't let all the negative things that you hear in the media shy you away from it, because you know what? Yeah, there are things that happen that are not good there, but there's also a lot more good happening than bad. And if you have questions, I'm here for you. Send me a message. I will be more than happy to even get on the phone with you and answer your questions, because if you're going to make a decision about this, make sure that it is an informed decision. If you choose not to ask anybody, who has served, a question about it, just make sure that you ask that recruiter as many questions as possible. And make sure that you feel good about it. Make sure that you know that, if you're going to invest years, in a job that you're selecting right now, make sure it's something that you're going to want to use afterwards. Because that's the one thing I would change. I would have probably held out. I probably would have waited another week to see what other options would be open to me with the score that I got, or I would have retested, which is something I forgot to say earlier. When you test and you don't test that well, you want to get a higher score, you can actually wait and then test later. I think it's 6 months later. And if you get options that week or that whatever day you go in and you don't like the options, come back another day or another week or a month later and see what else they offer. Because the way that they do it is that every day there are so many people leaving the military. So that means that those slots become open. So if today there were like 100,000 linguists that left the military, I mean, that's a super high number that probably doesn't happen because we have like 2.4 million people overall in the armed services. But anyway, those slots become open, and if it's open, that's an opportunity. So that's all I've got. I hope that you really enjoyed this conversation. I hope that you learned something, and feel free to reach out and ask me any questions. All right. Until next time. Thanks for watching.